Tonight on The GOAT Show.
Whoa.
I was taking the streetcar by myself at like 8 years old.
You mean meme coins?
Well, having structure is essential, right? And having a regimented training program.
Big box stores.
It's always going to get more and more insane, yeah.
And I don't fault you for that. Like, I'm a multitasking pro.
Welcome to The GOAT Show, the show where we celebrate and debate all things great. I am joined by my co-hosts, Fresh and Deezy. I am ZiLLY, aka Ravine, your host today. I don't know if we're going to do much of an intro because we have an amazing guest today that we're going to bring on in just one moment. But before we do, Fresh, what do the people out there, the goats out there, have to do?
You gotta like, subscribe, hit the bell, drop a comment, and send it to everybody you know.
If you are interested in the world of high-level finance, if you're interested in the world of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, AI technology, then this is definitely an episode you don't want to miss. But before we get to our guest today, quick word from our sponsor.
Blood beard, what a beard!
He's got a beard, a very special beard, a romantically inclined beard. Oh, what a beard, you can't resist it. Blonde beards.
Go to blondebeards.com and use code GOAT at checkout for 10% off your first order.
All right, we are back. Our guest today is none other than Nadab Ahktar. He is the co-founder, president, and chief operating officer of a company called CrowdPoint Technologies. And he's someone that I met him at one of Grant Cardone's 10X workshops that also Brandon Dawson hosts. That's kind of how I know him. But man, this is a guy that is just been in high levels of understanding finance, business strategy. He's building his own blockchain. I don't know. He can explain it all, but it's a lot of stuff. Super cool. So Nadab, welcome to the GOAT Show. How are you doing today?
I appreciate your having me. I'm doing great.
Man, where do we begin? So yeah, we met a while ago. Me and my brother were doing some 10X workshops, and he's doing his tech thing with his company. See you soon. And I believe it was Sean Conrad that introduced us, and we had a great conversation. And you're talking about sort of your background in finance and technology and things like that. But so we'll get into all that. But before we do, something we do on the show, something we ask every guest is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Instant teleportation.
Do you just want to go from coast to coast around the world? What's the...
Man, I travel so much. I'm probably on the road a good 70-80% of the time. And as much of a blessing as it is to be able to fly and go around everywhere, imagine how much more productive I could be. And I could literally maximize life if I could just freaking instant teleport anywhere. I could go from a meeting to a date with my wife to go visit my family, you name it, right? My close rate would go higher because it's about getting in the room.
Right, exactly. Well, from superpowers to superhero origin stories, tell us a bit about where'd you grow up, what life was like growing up, sort of maybe your journey before you got into your professional life.
Yeah, happy to. Great question. So I grew up in Garland, Texas. My family immigrated. My parents immigrated from Pakistan to the U.S. in the late 80s. I was born in Houston, but grew up in the North Dallas area in a suburb called Garland. Grew up, I didn't know any better, but grew up with humble resources. Never knew the difference. There was always food on the table, roof over the head, clean clothes, etc. Went to a public school, but was fortunate that because of my academics, I was selected to go to the honors programs and so on. And so you had, or I was one of the blessed few that had the best access to education. Garland ISD, where I grew up, or I was in their school system, had some of the best education around. Ended up going to my fifth grade teacher was a alum of Baylor University. So I decided when I was 10 years old, I was only applying to Baylor and nowhere else. And so I ended up going there. I studied both finance and chemistry.
Sorry, I want to pause you there. That's interesting. Like, so normally people are kind of like one or the other, right? Like, you're going to go the science route and do the science thing, or you're going to do, finance and follow that path. Was it just that you had two different interests and you just decided you wanted to pursue both? Like, how did it land on your plate that you were going to do both something in the science field and in finance?
Yeah. Great question. So, you know how in high school, maybe you guys experienced this, but I certainly had a bunch of high achievers around me, and everybody was like, knew their lane. They knew the folks that were great in biology wanted to go become doctors or pharmacists or so on, right? You had the engineers that knew what they were going to do. I had my college roommate. We went to high school together. He knew he wanted to be a music education guy, right? Everybody just knew what they wanted, what their passion was. I'm like, man, I'm freaking good at everything. Like, what what do I pick? So I had no idea. The only reason I picked finance and chemistry is literally in high school, I looked at a list of highest paying jobs, highest paying careers. I look and references stuff like I forget what it was, but like athlete and so CEO and all. And I see one that well, I can't just go to college to be a CEO. Someone had told me because when I was younger, I was like, "Oh, I'll get an MBA." They're like, "Great, what are you going to do with it?" That's generic. You need something specialized. I'm like, okay, great advice. And then again, I'm looking at the jobs list and I see brain surgeon, and the salary and income was like close to $1 million a year. This was back in 06, 07. I graduated high school in 07. And so I'm like, shit, that's the one. And I had a lot of, I'm sure some of you guys can empathize with this, but growing up in a South Asian family, there's my parents never pressured, never expected, never pushed for one way or another. But there were just a lot of folks around me that were going to med school and so on. So I'm like, shit, I'll go to med school. And my first job in high school, by the way, was at an OBGYN clinic. And so I ran, I helped with tech and medical transcribing while I was in high school. So I was exposed to the clinical side anyways. So I'm like, great, it's that. But I knew to go to med school, you got to have a differentiation in the application process. So in orientation, they talked about how not all med school applicants are biology majors. Some are chemistry, some are, you name it, right? And I'm like, so I'll do finance, but I'll have a concentration in chemistry. It'll get all my I really enjoyed chemistry in high school, same in college. The two A's I'm most proud of were OChem 1, OChem 2. Right, freaking hard to do. But I knew this is what's interesting of why although I studied finance and chemistry, I did not go to med school. I had this wild idea as a freshman. I was like, shit, technically I was on a 5-year degree plan since I was dual concentration. And scholarships only paid for 4 years. But scholarships also only paid for they paid for tuition, but what about all the other admin stuff and cost of living and all, right? Shit adds up. So I had heard from some friends or acquaintances around campus that there were some upperclassmen a few years ago that opened a hookah bar, and they had it right next to campus. I'm like, shit, I could do that. And so I call my brother. I'm like, because we had a friend that invested some money in a hookah bar in Dallas years back and made good money off of it, allegedly. So I'm like, let's do it, man. And we had both saved up a lot of money, to like tens of thousands of dollars in high school because we had full-time jobs and invested in the market and so on. And so we're like, let's open a freaking bar.
Whoa, let's not skip past this. So you were investing in the market while you were in college, high school.
I say it was my dad that put in money in a little bit of companies
Okay.
here and there. It was not like I'm a options trading whiz or stock whiz. None of that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But
None of
still,
that
I mean,
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
still
It was
impressive.
just
But okay.
our parents were very smart. They didn't. I mean, I worked like 36 to 40 hours a week in high school, and
Wow.
which was
Okay.
illegal for stuff.
Sorry. Quick tangent. How do you feel about that? Because I saw this video on TikTok the other day where it was like a mom, and she was proud of her son for going into, I think it was like a gas station and like buying his own beverage, and I'm like, man, it's a gotten like I was doing that. Like that's not even a second thought. Like,
I grew up in Toronto. I was taking the streetcar by myself at like 8 years old, going across the city.
Yeah, yeah. If she's celebrating that mediocre behavior, that's like soft shit, man. Like, like that, she might as well write off the kid because if you're already celebrating, that's like a basic need to live in life.
yeah, I mean, it's just weird to me. I'm like, I just hope that's not the culture now. That level of helicoptering to where like you can't let your kid out of your sight for like 5 minutes without being paranoid. I don't know.
So I got married a couple months ago. Actually, 2 months to the day.
Congrats.
Congrats.
Appreciate it. The wife and I have been talking about family planning and having kids and all this stuff. And I got to tell you, growing up, I used to be quite fearful of. I was like, I'm not going to be a good dad, and I didn't want to be a parent. And whenever I date a girl, I'd specifically look for a woman that didn't want to have kids and all. And it was literally only because I thought I'd be a hard ass dad. And because not that my parents were that way, it was just we were surrounded by my parents, my aunt and uncle, who were like a second set of parents to me. They just didn't accept excuses. It was this is the minimum. Like making an A was the minimum expectation. All right, like it was that. It's like you got 98%. What happened to the other 2%?
Right. I know that story. Believe me, I know that story, man.
Right, and so I thought again because like some of my core values even in life or as a professional come down to grit and not making excuses, getting shit done. So I thought, look, if I have a son, a daughter, doesn't matter, I'm going to be like, look, there's no consolation prizes here. Like life is what it is. Because I learned a very important lesson from my mentor growing up. He was a managing partner at the investment banking firm I was at. He said, "The world does not care about effort; it only cares about results." That's it. Because I was in investment banking, high stakes game, man. That's it. And you would never celebrate effort. None of that. There was no pats on the back. You submitted a deliverable to the managing partner or client. You didn't get feedback. That was a good thing. No feedback was good feedback, right? Because it meant they were pleased, not satisfied, but they were pleased, right? So, look, I going back to my point about kids in society. I think we were in a very dangerous time in our society where um, I'm going to call it soft culture. I'm not going to label it as woke because sometimes when you say woke, people think it's liberal or democratic. None of that, right? I'm just saying softness in general, where this maybe on a definitely in the U.S., probably some parts of Canada, North America, um, not so. Some of it probably hit Europe as well. But dude, this softness, man. It was just like whether you're a man or a woman, doesn't matter. It was just so distorted. What minimum what a minimally viable lifestyle would what that consumed, right?
I'm gonna steal that minimum viable lifestyle.
It's the participation trophy era.
hmm But also the notion, I actually think it's the notion of instant gratification that is more of the issue, right? It's okay, I did something. Where's the reward? Where's the feedback? I'm like,
I mean, do you feel like social media might play into that, where because you put up a picture and all of a sudden you get a couple of likes? There's a certain kind of feedback loop that you create from doing that activity, and it's pervasive in our society.
totally. Social media has a huge impact on that. Overall connectivity has a huge impact on that. I mean, look, like you get hungry now. What do? You press a button on an app. 10, 15 minutes later, food gets delivered. right? Back in the day, well, when I was coming up as a kid, you got hungry, you got to go make a sandwich or wait for dinner time or, go eat an apple or something to make do until the meal time. Now it doesn't work like that.
Right. Yeah. Everything's at your fingertips, literally, at any moment. I guess, and we'll, I do want to get back to the finance stuff that you're talking about, but I guess I'm kind of, because I'm older, man, and I haven't gotten married yet. These guys down here, they're in, Deezy's married and Fresh is in a great relationship, but I kind of have the same fears that you were just talking about, man. I'm like, I feel like, cause I don't know, maybe it's the South Asian thing, but like, I feel like it's once I'm in family mode, it's like, I feel like that's my life and my job. Like once I get there, it's like, and I'm going to go full force into that. You know what I'm saying? I feel like I guess you're never really prepared for that, but I just feel like maybe that's what's holding me back. I don't know. What do you, I kind of wanted to ask you about that. Like, do you regret not maybe getting married earlier or having family earlier?
I don't. I think if I gotten married earlier or had kids, I'm turning 36 in May, and part of me is like, shit, man, I like we probably gotta have kids soon because I don't want to be a 40-year-old first time dad, and then be an old man later. And so there's thoughts of that where I'm like, if I could have compressed time, it would have been great. However, um, I'm gonna go back to the scientist in me. Self-actualization for males a lot of times happens in their late 20s or early 30s. Sometimes it happens earlier. Usually it's trauma related, and then there's obviously byproducts of that. And some folks just self-actualize because they were around incredible environments. I was around a great environment. Mine was I probably didn't hit my full stride until my maybe even a few years ago, right? Where it's just like I knew exactly who I was, exactly who I wanted to be as a professional, as a family man, like just in general, right? And so, in that respect, I'm incredibly happy that waited this long, and we'll have Jessica and I will have kids during this era of my life. Now, I will say to what you referenced about once you have kids, once you have a family, like you're just going to be, that's your job. I would urge you to reconsider that statement. I used to have that as a big hurdle or hindrance of mine to get married and to have kids. Then I have a dear friend of mine who actually lives here in Miami. He's a entrepreneur of actually pretty great notoriety. His name is Nick Sarnicola. Nick was one of the first, he was one of the co-founders of Body by Vi, Visalis, and so on. He launched a new company called Shoply. So he's a co-founder of that great decentralized e-commerce tool or platform. So I saw Nick a few years ago basically run his family as a business. And I don't mean to say that in like an emotional, non-empathetic, like black and white way. No, what I mean by that is he would set, for example, one day I'm like, hey Nick, like the only time I have is between 3 and 7 p.m. He's like, I can't. It's kid time. It's dad time. And he was so deliberate about how he scheduled his life around and interwove it, like 7 to 8:30 every morning. He knew he's taking his kids to school, right? And he shares custodies with his ex-wife, and so yeah, he had on weeks, off weeks, all of that. But they have a tremendous relationship, very very collaborative. But he would hire, for example, he would say, I'm hiring a CEO of the house. Like what like a house staff? He's like, no, like someone to oversee everything, like take all scheduling, all activities that the kids have, so on and so forth, and calendar it and optimize it, right? And so he ran it like divisions of a corporation, which is why I say he ran it like a business, and it was so effective because what that taught me is those blocks of time. Uh, he was there 100% fully intentional about that moment. And I think that's why you reference, Ravine, once you have kids or you have a family, people say, or society tells you, oh, they have to be your number one priority. Why do you have to pick? I don't pick, right? Like I don't pick, they're all top priority. The business is, the family is, the wife is, like everybody. And it's just about when you're freaking there, you're fully there. I was guilty of this a lot in my 20s, and I still suffer for it, to be totally transparent, where I'll be, at a dinner doing that. I mean, yeah, babe, or mom, I'll be all of that, man.
I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right now.
Hmm.
In the interview.
And I don't fault you for it. Like I'm a multitasking pro, like really, really scary good at it. But it's when it comes to the family, I think that or like having kids, having a wife, partner, whatever your way of life is, I think it's so important to set those intentional blocks, because um, let's say you were to do that in your business world as well, in your careers, you're kind of like halfway, half in, half out. That's not being a real man. Being a man is like walking with conviction. It's sticking to your values. It's being literally like intentional about the actions that you take. Otherwise, what you're really saying to the universe, the energy that you're putting out, is that you're so reactionary, that you're freaking passive, that you're a beta, that you are not the captain of your own ship. And somebody called me out on that bullshit, because I was on that wave for a long time. Somebody said, Nitty, you want to be the captain? Right? So you got to decide. And so that's what triggered me, is I just decided I wanted to be the captain.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think that is, when I look back at my life as well, I think, my dad would do his thing, he's a surgeon or whatever. But when he came home, it was like hanging out with the kids, him being wise sage, and us, rolling our eyes, but still, still doing the thing. Well, speaking of running corporations and finance and all this kind of stuff, let's talk about that. So you graduated from Baylor, and from what I've been able to gather from using the new AI tools, Grok. Sorry, I grokked you. I perplexity'd you. Hope you didn't mind. But it says that you started working at a place called Nexus Health Capital as their COO. Is that jumping years ahead, or when does that enter the picture?
No. Started that in college. So my brother and I did end up opening a hookah bar that crashed and burned inside of 6 months. We didn't fail.
Wait. Sorry, you've done so many interesting things. So you opened the hookah bar. What happened, man? What did you learn from that situation?
We weren't all. This was freshman year. So what we learned is you can't be half in, right? You got to be like in it. And my brother was just finishing up his university, and or maybe he had just done it. I don't remember. He studied political science at UTD, and we were subleased inside of a restaurant, but we picked. It was a horrible location. We thought Richardson, Texas, would be great because there's a big culture. The hookah bars that were already popular were nearby, but they were right off the highway. They had a great location. We were 5 minutes inland, and we picked the wrong place. Now, fortunately, we were a sublease. We didn't spend too much money. It was like maybe 10, 12 grand. I don't remember, on just buying hookahs. And we went in, we were like, oh, we got to buy a bunch of hookahs and buy a bunch of inventory. We did no market study. We had no business plan. We had no marketing, no branding. Yeah, sure, we created a logo and stuff, but I don't even remember the name of our hookah place. It was so long ago. Probably wrote it off as a trauma response, but did that. We ended up closing down after a few months. Kept all the inventory. Obviously, we were subleased, and so didn't have lingering liabilities. But what we realized is you cannot. There's no such thing as a passive business owner, right? Like you got to freaking be there. You got to be present. You got to promote it. You got to know how to manage it. I was in Waco, right? So it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, depending on how fast you bob and weave through traffic. And my brother was in Dallas at the time, but still, it just wasn't conducive. We didn't have a great partnership either. The sublease, like there was such a threshold to get in. Some days the bar owner was like, we need to charge a cover. Some days they didn't. Like, for example, even our grand opening night, they're trying to charge our family and friends cover to come in. We're like, what? Like, this is ridiculous. We never discussed this, but so we weren't in control. All good. We spent the next probably year or so. I ended up getting contracts with bars and restaurants in Waco through parties. I wasn't a promoter. What I produced though. I would hire other promoters and bring in talent, bring in like thematic nights, all of that, and got our feet wet in nightlife that way. Eventually ended up opening in 2010. I was a junior, junior in at Baylor. We opened a bar in downtown Dallas called the One-Eyed Penguin, OE Penguin. Maybe it was 2009. It's still open today. We owned it for several years. Used that as a catapult to open more restaurants and bars throughout North Dallas. Now, what was cool, junior year, a couple months into the bar, my brother was fantastic at making connections and being a deal maker. He meets this gentleman who's a managing partner of a healthcare focused investment bank that's moving his firm from New York to Dallas, and he's looking for interns and so on. My brother's like, "You got to come. We'll take him out to dinner." I'm like, what the hell's an investment banker? I had no clue, no clue. I start Googling it. I'm like a stock person. They're like, no. These are like people that make deals. And I asked some of my professors, like, yes, mergers and acquisitions, and high power deal making. Like, man, this sounds interesting as heck. And I thought, all right, I'm gonna go to dinner. I'm gonna make a good impression, and hopefully, like, somehow finagle to get a opportunity for an internship. Turned out I made a good impression at dinner. Next day, he invites me to lunch and gives me a couple of scenario like problem solving situations. I hit him. Next day, great, we're gonna have you as a summer intern and unpaid summer internship. I'm like, no problem, done. I guess I made such a good impression that they kept me on year round, converted to a paid internship and all. I started as an intern at that firm, ended as chief operating officer over my years. I was with them, a decade plus, having closed the firm during my tenure there. Did several billion in M&A transactions. We worked with primarily clinical services companies, physician practice management firms, behavioral health companies, and so on. I was involved in every facet of the deal, not just in operations. I was the analyst, the associate, writing slides, helping with analyses.
If you don't mind me asking, and it may be complicated, I don't know, but because we hear this a lot, right? And banking and bankers and that type of thing, probably because of 2008 and that stuff. Like they're sort of like when you say that, people have a certain impression. I guess my question is, as an investment banker, like you said, you're putting together deals, but what essentially would be like a process for figuring out, like, okay, what kind of deal to do, or what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, and maybe it's something in general, like maybe like how can you look at something and say, hey, this is a good deal, let's move forward, or this is a bad deal, let's not move forward with this?
Yeah. So it really all starts with this basic premise, which is buy low, sell high, right? Everything else you do from a deal is a derivation of that. So if you're looking at acquiring a company, you have to see, does it provide any synergies to either in a single operation that you already own, or maybe an aggregate portfolio. Depends on what type of acquirer you are. You could be a private equity firm or some type of conglomerate that's diversifying, or you could be a company that's adding on an acquisition to your company. So it all just boils down to buy low, sell high. And what you look for is a type of value add. It could be a value add in terms of, let's say, optimizing your supply chain, right? A vertical acquisition. It could be a horizontal acquisition where it's synergistic to the same type of like customer profile you have. I'll give you an example. When was it Coca-Cola that bought vitamin water, right? They have the distribution. They have similar customers that are looking for drinks, but vitamin water had a different segment of customers. And so that's a congeneric acquisition where you have similar back-end distribution, but you're simply acquiring the customers, right? And so it was synergistic to them tremendously and got them into this healthy water space. Facebook, when they acquired Instagram, vertical, similar type of acquisition. They're expanding their market share, being defensive. Ended up being a tremendous acquisition for them, right? And so that's kind of what you look for. Some might be defensive, where you buy something to shelf it. That's a little bit more aggressive. You could do corporate takeover, like all those things.
I don't know if you saw this on X or there were, man, I forget her name. I'll have to find it and put it in the show notes. But she was talking about how there's sort of a predatory thing going on with certain businesses like Party City and some of these other smaller businesses where they're essentially, I guess it's just Vulture. You'll call Vulture capitalism, I guess, where they're coming in, they're
bankrupting.
Yeah, just bankrupting these businesses and then repackaging them, I think, also as investment vehicles and things like that. Not to say I'm not implying in any way that's anything that, whatever. I'm just saying that it just seems like there is a side of this that can be that destructive kind of, pathway. And then there's a side of this, which is really just, hey, you got you got piece A and piece B, and we're just trying to put them together so we can make something better together rather than separately.
Yeah. So that certainly exists. What you described of the vulture tactics, and reality is, man, it's a dog eat dog world, right? With those, I'll say, for companies like Party City, and there's probably a ton of other, like Toys R Us and
Big box stores.
yeah, big box stores. You have to think that a lot of those business models simply did not evolve with the times, right? Most folks now, like, you want to buy something. I mean, I know the way I grew up. You want to buy something, you go on Amazon. It's there a couple hours or a couple of days later. You need something faster, you go to Instacart or other type of plays. Like, I know with my lifestyle, I travel so much, or even when I'm at home, I'm doing 18, 20-hour days. I don't have time to go to the store. I just look on an app during in between Zoom calls, right, and get that stuff delivered. Now with those big box stores, they still hold a tremendous amount of brand equity. They may have some back end, suppliers, vendors that they have relationships with. That's intellectual property or assets too, and so those brands may carry assets. They're just inflated because they don't have market share anymore. They have suboptimal operations for what things are now, and so that's why they get gobbled up. But they're still, like, even if they went bankrupt, they still hold tremendous value. So there's a play that a number of folks have, some I'm familiar with, that they've gone and acquired these legacy big box brands that still hold brand equity. They have domain power, good ranking, so on and so forth, and they've made them into e-com plays, right? They may have some anchor stores here and there, right? Maybe they double as distribution centers or warehouses, but there are some anchor stores that might still exist, but there's no reason to just eviscerate those brands. So people have a thesis that they can buy the brands and rebuild them that way.
Yeah. I have a question about you. So you at Nexus Health Capital, I think is what you're talking about. You ultimately became the chief operating officer. My question to you is, what makes a great chief operating officer? Does the COO? Because my thought is that the CEO is sort of the big picture guy, the visionary or the whatever, and then the operator is the operator. He's getting in the dirt, figuring out what's what. Is that accurate? Is that fair? Or do you feel like
I think that's absolutely fair. However, I want to expand upon that because it's I want to expand on it for one main reason, which is, let's say somebody gives you an idea. What good is an idea? Right? You gotta execute on it. And I'm not saying this is what happened at Nexus, because my the managing partner CEO was highly competent. I mean, one of the best dudes, most intelligent dudes I know. Uh, in my opinion of what makes a great chief operating officer, or just an operator in general, is really living by this assertion, which is you got to be a creative solution specialist. All right. Like I literally wrote that on my resume, creative solution specialist. I think I have that on my Instagram profile as well. That's always how I saw things. It comes down to GSD, getting shit done. And so that's what makes an operator is you just got to be able to connect the dots. You got to be an architect. You have to be a problem solver. But it's multifaceted. You got to know the numbers, because if you just get stuff done and it's incredibly expensive, what good is that? Then if you get stuff done that nobody wants to buy, i.e. the marketing or sales side, what good is that? Right. And so it's being a comprehensive, and by the way, if you do things that are non-compliant, non-ethical, outside of regulation on the legal side, what good is that? So it's really being a well-rounded player that knows how to, move in these different departments or different ways of thinking. So it's a very, very difficult job to be a chief operating officer, or just be an operator in general. Is you got to take stuff from idea and concepting to actual execution, and it boils down to being a creative solution specialist.
Right. That makes total sense. We've asked this of other entrepreneurs in the past that have come on the show. Do you feel that it's better as an entrepreneur? Because now you are doing your own thing. I understand, and we'll get into that in a second. But I guess my question is, do you feel like it's better to come up through the system? Like you came from literally intern to operating officer over the course of however many years. Some people, I think there's this romantic notion in our society, probably because of the whole tech sphere, that, the kid out of college, just starts doing his thing, and then boom, he's like the CEO, and then, driving Lambos. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is, do you feel that it's better for someone to say, okay, look, graduate from college, get into a certain line of whatever you're interested in, but learn the system, and then once you're ready, do your own thing? Or do you feel like, hey, be naive, jump in, and just hope that it works out?
So it's so interesting that you asked this. I've been going through this exercise, or I went through this exercise just a number of weeks ago. So beyond CrowdPoint, I recently started we have a lot to catch up on probably outside of this call. Started a quantitative trading fund called Excite Capital. We use quantum mechanics or quantum algorithms to have a probabilistic AI. So we trade the market, we trade the future. Don't do any historical shit like other people's AI and predictive models do. We're a very future-looking quantitative trading fund. Now, in this fund, I recently brought on I call him my kid cousin, although he's like 25. My kid cousin graduated from university in December. Economics guy, was looking for a job. I just so happened to be looking for analysts in the firm. And he was one of the groomsmen at my wedding, and I've literally known him since like a few hours after he was born. And so he's seen my entire lifestyle of working and the work ethic and so on. And he's shown consistently great potential of having a promising career. And he's always told me, he's like, man, I want to be like you. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do this and this and this. I told him, well, let's go look at buying a business, right? And because he's a big gym nut. Used to be a heavier set guy. Super proud of him. He's in incredible shape now, and I was starting a online coaching business because he didn't find a job yet. I told him, so I talked to my brother and my partners about this, and like, hey, I'm gonna offer, his name is Rahul, I'm gonna offer Rahul an internship, and I'm gonna bring him in. But I took him to dinner, and we had a couple of I said, I'm taking off my brother hat. I'm going to talk to you as a coach, or I'm going to talk to you as a managing partner of my firm. I'm going to give you career advice. I'm going to say that there are two realms that you could go down in an internship. I said, I'm caveating this, like I'm offering you this internship, but I'm putting a 90-day cap on it. Like, and I want you to know that this is not a path to full-time employment. Like, I'm not considering that, and I don't want that for you. What I want for you instead is I want you to go to, and I said, you could, there are two ways that you could do this. My personal suggestion to you is that you go learn in some corporate environment that teaches you sales, and has a very deliberate, very intentional training program. I said, I want you to learn that because you'll have discipline processes and others where they put structure around you. And and I told him, I said, it's because like for certain people, and this is my opinion of you, it's not either good or bad. It just, this is my assessment, is that for certain people, having structure is essential, right? And having a regimented training program. I said, you could, let's say you crush it with the internship and you work with me in this, and our firm is crushing it, and so on. But I know I'm not someone that's going to spend deliberate amount of like in the first year, especially maybe the first couple of years, we're not going to have those systems, processes, training, like so on in place. I'm a very deep tech firm. Like how do I teach you the deep technology and quantum mechanics if you didn't learn that stuff? And so I told him that let's say you joined a startup or you started your own company, you might be exposed to 10 different hats, and it could be a great thing. And you'll develop grit, tenacity, so on. But it boils down to if you're a really good problem solver. Otherwise you could be a leak stop. Where you just get plugged in, or you become like a one-hit wonder. You haven't really like learned the true fundamentals. In my case, this is where the chemistry finance degree, studies became so important, because all I learned was the scientific method, in biology lab and chemistry, physics, all that was scientific method. Test, make a hypothesis, test, research, then you got to write a report, and then you got to write a conclusion. That's all I did in investment banking, was that, right? Scenario modeling and so on. Same in being a solutions architect and all. And in his case, I'm like, I'm not saying you can't do that. You just have to make a choice, because you could theoretically join a startup and do incredibly well, and all, but maybe the first few years it'll be famine, and and then you'll hit. But it's from a risk adjusted basis, there's higher risk here versus going down a corporate environment where you get developed, you have a name brand on your resume. Even if you joined a startup, you're like, I came from this environment that taught me systems and project management and training and corporate ESG stuff, where you're disciplined. In my environment, I'll say whatever I say. I'm working 24/7. I have no concept of clocking in and out. In fact, in my family group chat with my cousins, they were giving me shit about texting at 3-4 a.m. in the morning. I'm like,
Dang it, Fresh and Deezy. I told you we should have taken the Joe Rogan internships when they were offered, but we decided to do our own thing, I guess. Yeah.
Bro, I don't have time for a Joe Rogan internship. I also don't turn it off, bro. We need to hire people to do the editing and stuff so I can maybe take a nap.
To be fair, I did text at like 1 or something last night about I have a new place I'm in, and I'm literally in the closet. Don't hold me against that. Don't hold that against me. But no, I didn't. There's echoes in here, and so we were like, how are we gonna get the echoes out? Like I don't have time to. So we figured it out. But yeah, it was like late night chatting. You got to do it, man. What are you gonna do if this is what it is? If you're gonna be an entrepreneur, in my opinion.
Well, this is why I gave the Starbucks CEO shit on that other episode, right? It's like, oh, 6 o'clock, clocking out, like, and you're a CEO of something, bro? What? They're paying you like millions of dollars, bro. Get the fuck out of here. You're fired. You're fired.
he should have been.
Well, he was. So
There's no way he jumped from such high levels and he just didn't work past 6.
You know what it was? Probably his wife was watching that episode, and she was like, he just said it to appease her. Ended up not working in his favor, but
oh man. Well, talking about sales, I gotta bring him up. The great Grant Cardone. That's where I met you, and we'll definitely get into CrowdPoint in a second. But I'm just kind of curious, like how did that relationship develop, and what was your role? I think it was M&A, right? In Cardone Ventures and things like that.
Yeah, it's a fair question. So a number of years ago, CrowdPoint had explored and was collaborating with Cardone Ventures on building some tech for them, and and possibly entering that. While we didn't end up going down that route, Brandon Dawson, who's CEO of Cardone Ventures, he and I stayed good friends. Um, I think it was 2023. I had just come back from a trip in the Middle East where we were doing some big stuff. And he's like, "Man, I always knew you guys were going to keep doing big stuff." And he's like, I asked him if he was in Miami and we should get together. He's like, "I'm at the real estate summit, one of Grant's events. Come see me." I'm like, "Great." And so I go hang out with Brandon, and we're talking, and I had referenced to him this idea I had to be a coach or an advisor of sorts to entrepreneurs on M&A. Now where I'm doing the deals as an investment banker, just teach them concepts. And he's like, and I told him, I was like, man, but because I knew some folks that were doing these like coaching calls where they're doing like one a week to many, and they're making bank doing it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. Like 'cause you guys know, as an entrepreneur, as a startup person, like there's feast or famine. And I'm like, I'm a few years into the CrowdPoint game, and savings and investments start to dwindle, like stuff that you've been living off of, right? So that's when Brandon's like, well, man, I'll help you out. Like we're friends. You can come to my podcast. We'll do a couple episodes. I'm like, man, that would be awesome. And I appreciate that, because I told him I have no brand, like no desire to be like an Instagram influencer or anything like that. He's like, no problem, man. I'll help you get credibility through social proof by coming. And I really appreciate that that he extended such a kind olive branch. And then somehow it came up, and I was like, man, it'd be real fun to work together on stuff on deals. He's like, and if you know Brandon gets this look. He's like, he does this like raised eyebrow look, and he's like, well, why can't that be now? And I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I got this company. He's like, well, like, look, the dude I had as the face of my M&A program, he's no longer with the firm, and I'm looking to do this thing called 10x Buy Sell, the Business Acquisition Club, where we'll be doing exactly that, teaching folks. I'm like, shit, that's awesome. And we explored, and I had obviously met his wife and some other team members, Natalie Dawson, who's president of Cardone Ventures, another tremendous entrepreneur. And she's like, well, why don't you have a serious conversation with her? And so we did, and I taught them about a particular concept that we had come up with in my firm called life after the deal. And in life after the deal, it was how do you align the emotional, operational, cultural elements of a deal, but you bind it in legal documents. I'll give you an example. Like standard purchase agreements would be like 20-ish pages long. Ours would be 50, 60, 70 pages long. And because we would have addendum after addendum talking about the emotional preservation, cultural, like, for example, let's say Deezy sold his company to Fresh, but Deezy still has some type of local, like, responsibility where he has to come in for 2-3 years and manage a team, manage a division. Fresh is in the corporate side. Well, how do we make sure that Deezy still feels like he's a leader? So creating alignment programs like that. And so that's a concept I brought to Cardone Ventures. And I'm an advisor. I'm not an employee or anything. So I teach at their workshops. I help on M&A deals. And I've been nurturing a pretty stellar group of dudes that, I shouldn't say just dudes, team members at Cardone Ventures that are conducting M&A. And so that's been my journey. It allows me to I own my companies and all, but I would say with great passion and vigor, I get to give back to entrepreneurs through empowering them and educating them about M&A.
Very cool, very cool. It's interesting. We had our friend Adam Nelson. He's one of the co-founders of a hot sauce brand called Blonde Beards, and that was something that we were kind of talking about, because he's a boutique brand. They just got in the Thrive market, but but they, it's like once a big company comes in and you have a certain brand and personality to what you do and a certain expectation and how you balance that. So that's fascinating. I'm really that's really interesting. Okay, without further ado, though, let's get to the big kahuna here. All right, so go through all this stuff. You get all this experience. You're learning from different people, making a lot of different connections, all that kind of stuff. Let's zoom out. When does blockchain, in general, the idea of the blockchain, land on your radar?
In my career, I want to say probably 2014. 2014, 2015, folks were talking about Bitcoin and what the hell is Bitcoin? I started studying the underlying technology, blockchain. Became quite fascinated with the idea of common knowledge, right? I likened it a lot towards, I was like, oh, this should be used in the healthcare system. And on the board of my firm was a gentleman named Fred Brown. Fred Brown, former chairman of the American Hospital Association, former chairman of the Joint Commission, which accredits hospitals and healthcare facilities. Fred, in his healthcare career, is a luminary, was very well known for being the father of what are now called integrated delivery networks for health systems. And what he did is he came up with a mechanism where you would have disparate care providers that in the continuum of care, like let's say you went from emergency room to post-acute care, which could be like an observation unit, or then you left the hospital, you went to a specialist, pharmacy, etc. You would have some standardized way of passing off information, medical records, insurance verification, so on, right? And so I thought, how interesting would it be if you would have the data rails and like the patient records, et cetera, and the payment rails, insurance, all on one system. And this is where I started thinking, man, blockchain could do this. Blockchain could do this. And I took a few years of computer science and et cetera in my in my education, but I was a really shitty programmer, but I had technical aptitude. And a great affinity for technology. So I dove deep into the space and started talking to clients about, oh, man, blockchain could fix this, and they're like, crypto? No, not crypto, blockchain, like distributed ledger technology.
You mean meme coins?
Yes, and that's where I'll reference my brother again, who was a consummate deal maker. He had some folks at the bar that were in the energy space, they were in the oil and gas space. And he referenced, it's like they want to launch a token, an ICO to raise capital, et cetera, for their company, but they want to do something really interesting. They want to come up with a token for trading West Texas crude. I'm like, okay. And I know nothing about launching a token, know little to nothing about, I knew what Bitcoin was and underlying tech. He's like, just take the meeting. You'll figure it out.
Sorry, real quick. Is this the early days? Like, is this like 2016, 17?
Yeah, this is like 2016. Yeah, this is 2016. And I take the meeting, and they want to launch a token and so on. You just, as many consultants do, or as an investment banker in this, I'll just bullshit my way through. I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Launching a token. I call my buddy from college, dear friend of mine, and I call him because he was the only one that I knew that was like familiar in the space. And I said, Nia, can we do this? And he's like, yeah, we can do it. We can help them. He's like, but you got to manage all the business side of things, and I'll just let me work on the tech and the strategy. I said, no problem. I'll do the deck, I'll do the model, I'll do all the other stuff. And so we took the engagement and we developed a mechanism for that company to be able to spot trade oil futures. You have to realize, like, that's a very difficult thing that I'm describing, especially in 2016. But we did that through this notion of decentralized custodianship. And how we did that, we created mechanisms, tokens back then that were CFTC compliant and SEC compliant, right? The only way we were able to spot trade is if you know how, like, finance, and this was one of my favorite courses I took in at Baylor. We took an option futures to derivatives course, and the other was like risk management. That's where Nia and I met. To settle a futures contract, you actually have to take custody of the commodity. That's when it's like fully settled. That's why it takes months or weeks to do. One of the ways you do that is you have a redemption partner. In this case, the client we're working with was the redemption partner. And we thought, there must be a way to decentralize that. We did that through IoT sensors, GPS sensors, and settled them West Texas crude, smaller batches, but still batches, significant batches that would spot trade and settle in whatever time period. Like I forget how long it took blocks to close that back then, like minutes, hours, right? So not instant settlement, but still real time settlement. Yeah, a lot faster than, not weeks, not months, but hours, minutes. And so we came up with that play.
For this, what you were doing then, it wasn't a chain that you built. It was like your own. It was like Ethereum or something like that.
I think we built on Hyperledger. Yeah, because we wanted something enterprise grade. We built on Hyperledger, low fees, and back then it was the most credible, right? Especially for enterprise plays and things like that. And so that's what we did. That project, unfortunately, our client ran out of money, and so our betas and everything like never went to public. But the subsequent years, I did a couple more plays with that same partner, an LP in his now hedge fund called Parada Capital, and I would always invest alongside of him in different plays. But it just continued my fascination with the use of Web3 technology, really distributed ledger technology. I think it got so. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Like in the early days of DLT, it was about NFTs and art and music and so on, which is where societal adoption usually occurs, as you affect culture and music and arts and all that. However, what the Web3 of back then, 2016, even now, like I'm gonna probably reference like late or early 2020s. It was more about ownership, right? The notion of Web3 in reality came down to, you guys remember the Dewey Decimal System? Like you go to the library, you pull a card, and you want to study a topic, you want to go pull a book, you got to pull a card, and it tells you the index number of where the book is stored. All right, and then you got to go to the yeah, 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 yeah. And you go to the shelf, the book's not there, or the book is there, but there's pages missing, and so on, right? So there's no like true on chain custody of that content. So it comes down to, in reality, most Web3 or protocols that are out there are really just skins on top of some centralized cloud or database like AWS, Google, you name it, right? What we sought out to do with CrowdPoint, and we have a platform. I'm not going to call it protocol because it's beyond protocol. We created a platform called Vogon. We have this central premise, just like I did with the healthcare analogy I referenced. You got to bring the payment rails and the data rails all in one, right? Where, let's say you have that index card that you pull up, that index card immediately like pulls up the actual asset, right? The actual whether it's an NFT, whether it's a sensitive document or so on. How do you have that? Well, we had to completely reimagine how technology systems and architecture works, and so that's when we developed Vogon, which is really, it's like, imagine if you had Snowflake, which is a data lake, a data repository. You took Snowflake, OpenAI, and Ethereum, and they all got together and had a mutant baby, and it was raised by NVIDIA. That's what we've built at CrowdPoint with Vogon. We've taken a cloud, decentralized it. We've embedded database capabilities. We've embedded distributed ledger technology to where when data comes in, we actually truly take custodianship, but on a decentralized basis. So it's a full Turing complete tech stack, which means that you can run like actual computations on it. And we're native quantum, which means that you don't have to have APIs where you call other people's shit. Like, it's actually native quantum. That boils down to being self-aware of, like, if you have some type of complex calculation that has to be routed to a CPU. Like instead of going to a CPU, you say this goes to a GPU or this goes to a QPU, which is a quantum process unit. That's what we do. And so our stack is the way I explain it. We built like a block. Imagine this, like where you would have a block on a blockchain. Most people just store a cryptographic hash on this. We store entire JSONs, which are database files. So you can run your and that's like one JSON. You'll have like a whole bunch of others on the block that allows us to store magnitudes more data on one block of our chain or our protocol, right? Versus others. So it's a highly efficient, it's highly secure platform for running applications, storing data in an environment that's sharded. Sharded means like your data's nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Like if there's 1,000 nodes that are running, let's say you crack the encryption for one of our blocks. Congratulations, that's 1/1 billionth of a sharded piece of data. The rest is spread out everywhere. That already changed encryption, right? So you have to have deterministic consensus in order to use any data. Like if I wanted to, Ravine, send you some data, like a file, I'm not going to actually send you the file. I'm going to send you a cryptographic hash that represents a polynomial, like an equation, right? Now, Deezy and Fresh and I have to confirm through consensus, deterministic consensus, we have to reach majority that you're a legit player and the smart contract of our sharing information or my sending information is valid and true. Because all of this data lives on chain, right? We're not storing it on AWS or Google or simply referencing it. Like everything's like on chain. The zeros and ones are actually here. And so we'll validate it. That's the public portion of the chain. The private side, which is all on one server, right? Your public key, your private key is like all on one server. What's going to happen, because we've deterministically have consensus and we've agreed that you're legit, you're a good actor, and so on. You're now going to unlock to rebuild that data on your end. So it's like taking it from my end and taking it to your side, depending on what type of contract there is. If I'm transferring to you, then you have ownership. If I'm simply sharing for you, then you'll only unpack like whatever you have. So it's like the best analogy is the Star Trek like beam me up, Scotty, where they're taking matter and like freaking beam that's what I'm describing. Is you rebuild the zeros and ones on your side. We have that. It's legit, demonstrable today. And so it's a big difference. It's what I'm describing in Web3 terms, like for your Web3 listeners, effectively translates to a layer 0, which handles the data transfer and actual custodianship, versus a layer 1, which would be more of the consensus side, just the cryptographic hash to reference something stored on somebody else's stuff. And so that's our innovation.
So is it similar to something like Arweave?
I mean, you could say some elements would be. It's not a pure play comparison, especially because of the advanced quantum elements that we have. I'll give an example. Like, my team has been innovating in quantum algorithms, like quantum as a service, like quantum computing without the hardware, without superposition for the DoD and intelligence community since like 2015, 2016. There's like published papers. Yeah, a lot of our tech has now got declassified to where we can talk about it. And so Arweave, although great, great people, great technology, it's like apples to oranges, or like different way of thought.
Okay, so this is fascinating for a couple of reasons, because we've talked about on the show, and we joke about it with all our buddies who are in crypto. We're like, look, what was that? The Microsoft just dropped that chip. It starts with
Willow?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's Google.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Google is Willow, and Microsoft has another one. Whatever, but like, it's like all these blockchains that are out there that are so quote unquote secure because of the chain that they're on, and all that stuff. Like everybody's, the big giant question mark is, how is quantum computing going to play into this? I mean, you got these chips that so they say, are jumping dimensions to find answers to like crack codes. It's like, I mean, I don't know. This may be kind of scary to talk about, but do you feel like, one, do you? I guess what I should first ask you is, how do you think this quantum computational stuff is going to play into the current systems we have for protection of everything, essentially, whether it's passwords or it's blockchains and things like that? Do you think it's going to crack them all? And then I guess the second part of the question would be, does what you do kind of circumvent that because you are operating on the same level?
Yes. So I'll tell you, number one, on the first element you brought up, folks should absolutely be fearful, right? Of because that's exactly what quantum does. Quantum computing use the element that you're going to look at all possible combinations of a certain problem. So let's say it was targeted to break encryption on a wallet. It's going to do it, right? And I don't think to date there's been attacks like that on quantum attacks, I should say, on Web3 plays. I'm surprised there aren't, to be frank, but it's bound to happen. And, one of the core use cases of quantum is to crack encryption technology. This is where folks like my company, and there's a few other really reputable guys that are using what is called quantum key encryption, where you use multiple elements of quantum emulation, quantum algorithms that use like amorphic, like always changing encryption technologies, sharding as well. And so there are some platforms or protections out there that are quantum resistant. I'm going to say quantum resistant versus quantum proof, because reality is quantum proof. You got to have protection both the hardware side as well as software side, and that's just being unrealistic, right?
It's always going to get more and more insane. Yeah.
And considering quantum is like infinite,
Yeah,
you know, how you can have protection against the infinite, you know what I mean?
exactly. And so yeah, that's our belief is you got to get on this quantum key side. You have to start using decentralized clouds. It's more secure. It's cost efficient for sure, but it's the way to go.
Is that sort of so with CrowdPoint? Is that kind of one element of what you guys are moving in towards, or have already kind of, because you're saying, because I was imagining, DoD, governments, secrets, all that kind of stuff. You're gonna need to have the most badass encryption always to stay ahead. And you were saying that you were kind of involved in that side of things. So what are you seeing? Is that what CrowdPoint play is focused on? Is security type of things, as well as just the transfer of data?
Yeah. It's exactly that, man. There's a few benefits of our technology, right? I would say that the decentralization element is incredibly important. Interoperability. I mean, another thing for us is we don't want to build tech that is so cumbersome for people to use that you need a quantum engineer to run it. So that's not at all how we work. We have what's called like that block I showed you earlier. That's a polyglot interface, and so you can bring multiple languages to it, multiple coding languages, and run them simultaneously. Because that whole block that I referenced is itself a container, right? And so, which means that you bring different languages, like different microservices that you bundle together, and that's your program. That's what you're running. And so it makes it a lot more user friendly, as you don't have to have special blockchain engineers or quantum engineers and so on. You got somebody in those Java or Python, great. That's what you can bring in, and the automation side is really like on the APIs and server side. The DevOps is what they're called, development operations. That's what we automate. That's where our AI comes in. That's where it becomes self-aware. Is you just focus on running your application. We'll figure out the rest of the stuff and give you decentralization, quantum encryption, better economics, because you're not paying like for servers, you're paying per byte of what you use. So it's more efficient in that sense as well. So certainly the way of the future is this one of the ways that we're tackling that. And we did a transaction last summer. We took Vogon and its distribution rights, and we reverse merged that with a publicly traded company called Spectral Capital. Ticker symbol is FCCN. And so FCCN, its business model and goal is to build quantum data centers. So they call them hybrid edge data centers. So not only are they, which effectively just means that they're smaller data centers closer to where the data is being used. And so, you could have a micro data center with a couple thousand servers in downtown Miami. Well, we already have Equinix, a huge data center there, but much smaller footprint. Instead of tens of thousands of servers, you'll have a couple thousand servers. They spread out across the city, and so it's just bringing the data closer to you and less footprint, but with this quantum cloud that I described, which is Vogon.
Wow, blew my mind, man. That's dope. You brought up AI, so maybe we zoom out a little bit because that's the flavor of the last year at least. What are your thoughts on AI? Some people say AI is overblown. It's just a bunch of machine learning. None this year, folks. None this year. Other people say a new god has been created that is going to rule us all. Where do you fall in the spectrum of, how you see AI?
So one, I say on a general point of view with AI, everybody should be using it, right? Especially students, professionals. You should be using AI just like you would, learn Microsoft Word or Excel, or learn how to type on a device like in elementary school. You should be learning how to leverage AI because it's supposed to be a tool for efficiency. Now, I'm going to go back to what I referenced earlier, which is when I was talking about the internship, and we asked about training versus scrappy startup, right? If you don't know how to fundamentally leverage the AI or ask it an optimal prompt or problem solve in general, you're going to get bad returns, because how most AI, what people are used to is the prompt AI, like the chat AI, right? You ask it a question and it gives you a response. But just like in life, if you ask poor questions, you get poor results, right? Or poor answers. And so you have to elevate your quality of questions. And it comes down to setting your expectations, setting parameters. And so, you tell the AI, here's my goal. Here's the return format of what I want. Here's context, and here's like things I want you to avoid. And if you kind of follow that, like it's pretty good, but you have to get, well, versed at prompting the AI effectively. Oh, I was going to tell you that one very, very different approach that our company has in AI versus others, and this is the basis of the high frequency trading fund I referenced to you. It's called Excite Capital. So we launched Excite with this fundamental difference in approach in our paradigm to AI versus how everybody else does it. And it comes down to like when vast majority of predictive models that are out there, whether they're in finance, like I was talking about, or healthcare, logistics, marketing, you name it, those predictive models have one fundamental premise. And that premise is that they should look at some version of yesterday to predict what tomorrow is going to look like. But we say that in a ever increasing chaotic world where you have information asymmetry, like information overload, how is that relevant? Yesterday may be totally different than what tomorrow looks like, right? So our AI, what we developed, again, using quantum mechanics and quantum algorithms, is we have an AI that that reacts and predicts the future. We don't do any historical look back, right? So we take real-time information and we adjust our trading strategy or our AI's output by taking real-time information and parameterizing that in reference to rules, right? And this is it's non-regressive AI. Every other AI is regressive. They have some pool of patterns and old data that they look at, machine learning and large language models and so on. We don't do that. We take real-time data, we organize it, we parameterize it, and we react to it based on our rule sets. Rule sets would be things like, here are regulatory bounds that we have, here's the instruments we're trading, here's some conditions that we have from our liquidity providers and so on. And so that's what we do. I akin it to this. I have this analogy I reference. It's like, imagine you're driving down a highway going 80 miles, 100 miles an hour. and you exclusively make decisions of where to go by doing this, by looking at your rearview mirror. Majority of predictive models, man, AI or even manual, manual models, when they're running regressive approaches to life, that's what they do. They're looking at their rearview mirror. They're looking at what's behind them instead of looking at what's in front. And so our difference is we use our approach to AI. We call it probabilistic AI. And so what I mean by that, you could, let's say you had a quantum computer or a supercomputer. You look at all the different possibilities, but they're not relevant. All the different probabilities, right? What we do is we fix our algorithms. This is where we use quantum emulation without needing quantum hardware. And, we use GPUs to run parallel processing and all, but we'll tell our algorithms, this is the data to look at, ignore all the rest because they're outside of our hard rules, soft rules, and abstract rules, right? And so we only look at these probabilities. Now, on a risk-adjusted basis, we'll test one probability, and I'm looking at thousands at the same time. We developed technology called a data Hamiltonian, data tomography chattering. That's probably a whole nother podcast episode. I'm not inviting myself back. Just saying it's deep.
Yeah, you're welcome to come back anytime. This is fascinating to us. I don't know, I don't know about the goats out there, but I'm happy to listen to it. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, in a certain way, because we went through it fresh when this, not to switch topics, but when this Egyptian data came back where they're saying there might be these, columns and all that kind of stuff. So Fresh got on Perplexity, and maybe you can explain Fresh, but he got on Perplexity, and I don't know. Can you explain? We were trying to find out what we're trying to find out.
So basically, I was asking it who built the pyramids, and to kind of logically tell me that the ancient Egyptians, with the technology that they had, built the pyramids at the time when we just found out about this new discovery of things underneath the pyramids. And basically I had to lead it to finally be like, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't build it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's impossible to build this with the tools of the time, with the technology at the time. It would be impossible. But it wasn't looking at the newest stuff, and it wasn't really taking everything into account. I needed to kind of bring things up to it in order to lead it to the answer.
Right. It kept looking back at whatever it was told in the past from whatever, I guess it's learned from reading documents or whatever. So it couldn't get its head around the idea of okay, to build these columns and pylons, there's just no way that people with the tools and resources at that time could have built all this stuff if those things exist, as they say.
Oh yeah. It's because those AIs, they run on a static pool of data, right? And yeah, they may pull in some stuff if they have internet connectivity and all, where they pull in, but they run under this assumption that it's a deterministic model, that there's one optimal output, right? And unless you tell it hey, give me the probability, give me the 5-10 different scenarios that apply to this, it's still going to give you in those parameters. It's still going to give you very constrained and deterministic, very static outputs, right? It's not looking at beyond the box of the 10,000 possibilities that are not based on some historical data.
All right. Nitty, man, thank you for coming on the Goat Show. You're a goat. We appreciate you. As we do on the show, we like to toast the goat. So you are a goat. Cheers.
I appreciate that, guys.
You.
Cheers to you, brother.
Much success to all of your ventures, and we definitely want to have you back on soon, because you're working on so much amazing stuff and so much cutting edge technology and things like that. So we definitely want to deep dive at some point. But with that, thank you again for coming on the show. Fresh, what do the goats have to do before we head on out of here?
You gotta subscribe, drop a comment, hit the bell, send it to your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle. And I don't know, bro. I think you guys got to prepare yourselves.